My fiancé left my 10-year-old daughter home alone for 5 hours, then acted like the only problem was that her dinner was cold. I didn't find out from a neighbor. I didn't find out from a panicked phone call. I found out because I walked into my own house at 9:30 p.m. after a surprise 12-hour emergency shift, and my kid was sitting on the living room couch in the same pajamas she'd worn that morning, staring at the TV like it was the only thing in the room that couldn't disappoint her. The lamp by the couch threw this soft yellow circle on her face. It made her look smaller than she was, too quiet, too practiced. "Hey, baby," I said, forcing my voice into normal. "How was your day?" She shrugged, not a teenager shrug, a don't make this worse shrug. That's when I saw the takeout bag on the coffee table. The cardboard container inside had that pale, greasy sheen of food that's been sitting too long. I touched it. Cold. "Where's Ethan?" I asked. Ethan, my fiancé. The man who'd been living in my home since September. The man who'd promised, hand on my shoulder, "Don't call Carol, I've got her." My daughter didn't look at me when she answered. He went out," she said. "With the girls?" She nodded, still not meeting my eyes. And that's when my stomach did this slow, sinking drop, like stepping off a curb you didn't see. "Where did they go?" I asked, trying to keep my tone gentle, like I wasn't suddenly terrified of my own living room. "They said they'd bring dinner home," she whispered. "They went to a restaurant and mini golf." Mini golf. Not groceries. Not a dentist appointment. Not a quick errand. A whole night of laughs and neon lights and little plastic windmills, while my kid sat here alone, waiting for footsteps that didn't come. My hands started shaking, not dramatic shaking, just that tight, angry tremor you get when your body realizes something before your brain catches up. When Ethan finally walked in at 10:15, smelling like restaurant fries and aftershave, I didn't scream. I just said very quietly, "Why was my daughter alone?" He blinked at me like I'd asked something unreasonable. "She had food," he said. "She could have heated it up." And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a warning. If you'd met us a year ago, you would have thought my life was finally settling into something close to peaceful. Not perfect, not the kind of glossy matching outfits family you see on holiday cards, but steady. I'm 39, and I've been a single mom since my daughter Dottie was 3. Her father didn't die. He didn't get sick. He didn't disappear in a dramatic way that makes people soften their voices when they talk about it. He just left. One day he was there, complaining about bills, grumbling at the TV, acting like being a father was something that happened to him. And then he wasn't. No calls, no birthday cards, no "how was school?" no "tell her I love her." Just a silence that settled into our lives like dust. Dottie didn't cry the way people expect little kids to cry. She got quieter. She started asking questions in that careful, too grown-up voice that always made my throat tighten. Is it because I was bad? Did he not like me? I learned early that parenting alone isn't just paying the bills and making lunches. It's being the translator between your child and the world, explaining why adults do cruel things without teaching your kid that cruelty is normal. It's being the shield. And I had help. Thank God I had help. My former mother-in-law, Carol, lived about 15 minutes away, and she was the kind of woman who showed up without making you feel like you owed her your soul afterward. She didn't keep score. She didn't weaponize her help. She'd just appear with a casserole or a bag of groceries or a soft, "How are you holding up?" that made you feel less alone. When I got called into work unexpectedly, because my job isn't the kind you can ignore when something breaks, Carol was the reason I could say yes without fear. I work in emergency maintenance at an industrial facility. When a system fails, it's not just inconvenient, it can shut everything down. So I'm used to late-night calls, 12-hour shifts, being the person who fixes problems while everyone else sleeps. For years, it was just me and Dottie. And she's a gentle kid, a homebody. She likes drawing, science kits, and that cat she insisted we adopt, and then immediately treated like it was her younger sibling. She's the kind of child who can entertain herself with a book for an hour and then apologize for bothering you when she asks for a snack. Sometimes people see a kid like that and think, "Oh, easy." They don't see the way quiet kids absorb everything. They don't see the way they learn to disappear to make life easier for everyone else. That's why, when I met Ethan 4 years ago, it felt like maybe the universe was finally throwing me a rope. I met him at a friend's birthday thing, one of those casual gatherings I almost didn't go to because Dottie had a school project and I was tired. Ethan wasn't flashy. He didn't have that loud, charming personality that fills a room. He was attentive. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. When I mentioned being a single mom, he didn't flinch or make awkward jokes. He smiled and said, "That's a lot. You must be strong." It sounds simple, maybe even cheesy. But when you've been doing everything alone for years, having someone look at you like you're not broken goods, it gets under your skin. Ethan had 2 daughters from a previous marriage, Emma, 15, and Zoe, 12. He shared custody with his ex-wife in a strange arrangement. He had the girls from January through June, and she had them the rest of the year. I remember thinking how unusual that was, but Ethan explained it like it was normal, like it was something they'd agreed on because of work schedules and school and logistics. I didn't interrogate it. I didn't want to be the woman who picks apart someone's parenting arrangement on date 3. In the beginning, Ethan was good with Dottie. Not instantly, "I'm your new dad, good." Thank God, because that would have scared me. But steady, considerate. He'd bring her little things, not expensive gifts, small stuff. A keychain shaped like a dinosaur because she liked the museum. A pack of gel pens because she loved drawing. He'd sit with her at the kitchen table while she did homework and say, "Show me how you solved that," like her thoughts mattered. Dottie warmed up to him faster than I expected. And that part made me soften. Because I didn't just want love for me. I wanted Dottie to feel like she had a bigger circle around her. By the time Ethan proposed, it didn't feel rushed. We'd been together over 3 years. We'd navigated holidays, sick days, school events, the awkward balancing act of blending 2 separate households without forcing it. Ethan proposed on a quiet night at home, no restaurant, no audience. He cooked dinner, overcooked the chicken, honestly, and then he got down on one knee in the living room while Dottie was in the bathroom brushing her teeth. "I want to do life with you," he said, voice low and careful, like he didn't want to spook me. "I want to be a real family." And because I wanted that so badly, because I wanted to believe in a happy ending, I said yes. When he moved in last September, it was supposed to be the start of the one family under one roof chapter. Our house is a 3-bedroom place, not huge, but comfortable. Dottie has had her own room since she was little. It's her safe zone, her posters, her stuffed animals, her desk with half-finished science projects. Her world. Ethan's girls would need space too, obviously. But the problem started not with money or chores or the usual stuff. It started with a bedroom conversation that left a bad taste in my mouth. One evening in November, Ethan brought it up casually, like it was already decided. "Emma should have her own room," he said. "She's older. She needs privacy. Zoe can share with Dottie." I remember staring at him, trying to understand how he could say that like it was a simple puzzle piece. I kept my voice calm. "Dottie has always had her own room," I said. "This is her home. She shouldn't have to give that up." Ethan's expression tightened. He didn't yell. He didn't slam his fist on the table. He just looked at me like I was being unreasonable. "It's only for half the year," he said. "The girls deserve to feel comfortable too." Something about that wording, the girls, pricked at me. Like Dottie wasn't included in that category anymore. We dropped the subject, but the tension didn't disappear. It just waited. And then came that Saturday. The 12-hour shift. The promise. I've got her. And me walking into a house that felt like it had been quietly rearranged in my absence. Because the truth is, that night at 9:30 wasn't the beginning of the problem. It was the moment I finally saw the shape of it. And the shape was this. Ethan didn't see Dottie as his child. He saw her as mine. And if I pushed back, he would push back harder, just in a way that sounded reasonable enough to fool everyone else. After that night, the cold takeout, the shrug, the way Ethan said she could have heated it up, like he was talking about a grown roommate instead of a 10-year-old, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Because that's what women like me are trained to do. Be reasonable, be fair, don't be emotional, don't overreact. I told myself Ethan was overwhelmed. Blending families is hard. Shared custody is complicated. Maybe he just didn't think it through. So I watched, quietly. And once I started watching, the pattern came into focus in ways I couldn't unsee. The house felt different when I wasn't home. Not dangerous, not overtly hostile, just uneven. Dottie started asking permission for things she'd never needed permission for before. "Is it okay if I watch TV? Can I have a snack now, or should I wait?" Little questions that felt harmless on the surface, but stacked together, they formed something heavier, like she was constantly checking to see how much space she was allowed to take up. Ethan, meanwhile, began drawing invisible lines he never announced out loud. He'd take Emma and Zoe out for errands and come back with bags and smiles, talking about some joke at the store or a smoothie place they'd stopped at on the way home. Dottie would look up from her book and ask, "Where'd you go?" And Ethan would say, "Oh, just out," like it didn't matter. At first, I told myself, they're his kids. He's allowed to have time with them. And he was. But the timing always felt strategic. It was never when I was home and could take Dottie out myself. It was never framed as, hey, I'm taking the girls. Can we plan something for Dottie too? It was always when I was working late, or when I was asleep after a night shift, or when I assumed everyone was together. One night, I came home to find Dottie doing homework alone at the kitchen table. Where's Ethan? I asked. She hesitated before answering, just a beat too long. He went to Emma's volleyball thing, she said. They said they'd be back for dinner. They got back at 7:30, with ice cream. Emma still holding hers, chocolate melting down the side of the cone. Zoe licking hers, laughing. No ice cream for Dottie. No apology. No explanation. When I brought it up later, Ethan waved it off. She wouldn't have enjoyed it anyway, he said. She's not into sports. That sentence lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. Because Dottie didn't need to love volleyball to deserve to be invited. What bothered me more than the outings themselves was how Ethan talked about them. He framed everything like a zero-sum game. If his girls got something, Dottie was asking too much. If Dottie needed reassurance, his girls were being neglected. And any time I tried to explain that blending families meant expanding the circle, not shrinking it, he'd say the same thing, over and over, like a shield. You don't understand shared custody. It became his trump card. If I pushed back, I was being insensitive. If I questioned his choices, I was controlling. If I defended my daughter, I was making things harder than they needed to be. The worst part? He never raised his voice. He stayed calm, reasonable, measured, which made it very easy for everyone else to believe I was the problem. Even me. The tension peaked one Friday morning when Ethan was taking Emma and Zoe to the dentist. As they were walking out the door, he glanced back at Dottie, who was sitting on the couch tying her shoes for school, and said with this thin smile, "Hope this doesn't offend you too." The sarcasm wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I snapped. I told him his comment was childish, that using sarcasm toward a child, or about a child, was inappropriate. He fired back instantly. "You're being ridiculous," he said. "I'm not allowed to take my kids anywhere now?" That argument didn't resolve anything. It just exposed how far apart we were. Later that night, after the girls were in bed, Ethan tried again, this time dressed up as a calm conversation. He explained, slowly and patiently, like he was teaching me something basic, that because he only had his daughters for 6 months of the year, he needed to prioritize them. "I don't want them to feel alienated from their own mother," he said. I nodded. I understood that part. But then he added, "And because of the age gap, there are going to be a lot of things Dottie just won't be included in. That's normal." That's when it clicked. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't accidental. This was his expectation. Dottie would always be outside the circle when it came to fun, attention, and priority. I suggested something simple. "We can plan it," I said. "If you want a day alone with your girls, I can plan something special with Dottie. Same day. No one feels left out." He dismissed it immediately. "You're missing the point," he said. "You don't get it." And maybe he was right. Because what I was starting to get, the thing I hadn't wanted to name yet, was this. Ethan didn't see us as one family. He saw two. And he had already decided which one mattered more. The breaking point didn't come with yelling. It didn't come with slammed doors or dramatic ultimatums. It came quietly, on a morning that looked, from the outside, completely ordinary. I'd planned a Saturday off weeks in advance. Dottie had been counting down to it, marking a little dinosaur sticker on the calendar because we were finally going to the Science Museum. There was a new exhibit she'd been talking about nonstop. Something about fossils and interactive labs. I'd promised her we'd go, just the two of us. 3 days before, I told Ethan our plan. "I'll take Dottie to the museum," I said. "Maybe you can do something fun with Emma and Zoe that day." He nodded, non-committal. "We'll see." The morning of the museum trip, I went to wake Dottie up. She was already awake, curled on her side, face pressed into her pillow, shoulders shaking. I sat down on the edge of her bed, my heart immediately racing. "Hey," I said softly. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer, just handed me her phone with both hands, like she was afraid it might disappear. It was a text from the girl who lived across the street. "I saw your stepdad and your sisters at the mall yesterday. They went to the movies too." Yesterday. I felt something crack. Not loud, not sharp, just this deep internal snap that rearranged everything. "They went yesterday?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Dottie nodded. "They didn't tell me." I hugged her, held her tight enough that she finally let herself cry. When I confronted Ethan later, he didn't deny it. "I didn't realize I needed permission to take my kids shopping," he said flatly. Emma later slipped up, casually mentioning a movie they'd been excited about for days. So that was the pattern. Plans were being made. Dottie just wasn't included in the truth. That weekend, I took Dottie to Carol's house more than usual. I needed space to think, and she needed space to breathe. Carol noticed immediately. "What's going on?" she asked gently. When I explained, she didn't interrupt. She didn't defend Ethan. She didn't tell me to look at both sides. She just said, "Your daughter's well-being comes first, always." The following week, Ethan stopped pretending. He took his girls out more often, gave vague answers about where they were going, came home late with stories that didn't include Dottie at all. Then came Wednesday. I got home from work and found the house empty, except for Dottie, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. "They left around 2:30, she said. Said they'd be back for dinner." It was almost 6. I texted Ethan. "Where are you?" "At Emma's volleyball game," he replied. Didn't think Dottie would enjoy it. When they finally got home, after ice cream, of course, I didn't wait until bedtime. I told Ethan we needed to talk. I told him his behavior was making our home feel unsafe for my child. He got defensive immediately. "You're trying to control my relationship with my daughters," he said. "You don't understand what it's like to miss half their lives." I asked him what had changed. Before we lived together, he'd included Dottie. He'd brought her gifts, helped with homework, made her feel welcome. So why now? He stumbled. Then he said it. The thing that made everything else snap into focus. "I resent that Dottie gets her own room," he admitted, "while my girls have to share." I stared at him. "You're punishing my child," I said slowly, "because you're angry at me." He didn't deny it. That night, after he went to bed, I called in sick for 2 days. The next morning, I packed bags for me and Dottie and checked us into a nearby hotel. I texted Ethan that we needed space. During those 2 days, I finally asked Dottie the question I'd been afraid to ask. "How do you feel about living with Ethan and the girls?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "I feel like I'm always in the way." That was it. That was the moment I knew I could never go back to pretending this was fixable without something breaking permanently. When we went back home after those 2 nights at the hotel, I didn't feel relieved. I felt resolved. There's a difference. Relief is what you feel when something scary passes. Resolution is what you feel when you already know what has to happen next, even if you're not ready to do it yet. The house smelled the same. Our shoes were still lined up by the door. The magnet with Dottie's spelling test was still crooked on the fridge. But emotionally, it felt like walking back into a room where someone had quietly rearranged the furniture to block the exits. Ethan was subdued. Not apologetic, not defensive. "Careful. I've been thinking," he said, standing in the kitchen with his hands in his pockets. "Maybe it would be better if we didn't all live together right now." It sounded like a compromise, like he was being reasonable. But all I felt was a wash of relief so strong it almost scared me. "That might be best," I said. He suggested that he and the girls move into a small apartment temporarily, just until June, when his custody period ended. I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate. I didn't fight for the engagement, or the wedding plans, or the life we'd been building. Because somewhere between the cold takeout and Dottie saying she felt like she was in the way, something fundamental had shifted inside me. For the first time since Ethan had moved in, my body relaxed. That night, after the girls were asleep, I sat with Dottie on her bed. I didn't criticize Ethan. I didn't explain adult conflicts or assign blame. I just told her the truth in the only way that mattered. "Things are going to change," I said. "And none of it is because of you." She nodded, eyes shiny. "Are they leaving?" she asked. "Yes." She didn't smile, but she didn't cry either. Over the next few days, Ethan apartment hunted online like he'd been waiting for permission to do it. When he moved out 3 weeks later, I took Dottie to Carol's for the day. I didn't want her watching furniture disappear or hearing adults argue over boxes and keys. The move was tense but polite. Ethan cried when he hugged me goodbye, said he was overwhelmed, that he'd handled things badly. Part of me believed him. Another part, the part that had learned to trust patterns over promises, stayed quiet. 2 weeks after the move, Ethan texted asking if Dottie wanted to come over for dinner. I asked her. She shook her head immediately. "It feels weird now," she said. I respected that. When I told Ethan, his response was long and angry. He accused me of turning Dottie against him, of not meeting him halfway. Before I could respond, Carol called. Her voice was tight. "She told me something," Carol said. "Something I think you need to hear." Apparently, weeks earlier, shortly after the mini golf incident, Ethan had pulled Dottie aside while I was in the shower. He'd told her that blood comes first, that when his daughters were there, they would be his priority, that she needed to grow up and stop expecting to be included in everything. And then, this is the part that made my hands go numb, he'd asked her not to tell me. Said it would cause problems. Said sometimes girls need to keep secrets. I called Ethan immediately. At first, he denied it. Then, when I repeated the details Dottie had shared, his story changed. He called it a little chat, said I was blowing it out of proportion. That was the moment the last thread snapped. The next day, I went to his apartment while the girls were at school. I brought the engagement ring. I placed it on the table between us. I can't marry someone who manipulates my child, I said, especially a child who's already been abandoned once. He cried, apologized, asked for another chance. Then, when he realized I wasn't budging, his tone shifted. He told me I'd regret this, that no woman would want a partner who always put her kid first. I didn't argue. I just left. I thought returning the ring would be the end of it. I thought that once I'd drawn the line, once I'd said no more, the chaos would quiet down and life would start stitching itself back together. I was wrong. The escalation didn't come from Ethan anymore. It came from the ripple effects of everything he'd already set in motion. The first sign was a text message. It wasn't from Ethan. It was from Emma. Do you hate us now? I stared at the screen, my chest tightening in a way that felt unfair and cruel. These were children, kids who hadn't asked to be part of adult dysfunction, now caught in the crossfire of decisions they didn't make. Dottie was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring quietly. I showed her the message and asked what she wanted to say. She thought for a moment, then said, I don't hate anyone. I just need space. We typed the response together. Not accusatory, not dramatic, honest. I told her I was proud of her for knowing what she needed. That evening, I sat her down and told her the truth. No half-lies, no false hope. Ethan and I weren't getting married. They weren't moving back in. She didn't ask many questions. She just nodded, then asked if she could redecorate her room. That was the first real sign she felt safe again. Over the next few weeks, life grew quieter, but not easier. Ethan stopped calling, but his absence created a vacuum that other voices rushed to fill. My phone rang one afternoon while I was at work. It was Brian, Ethan's ex-wife's husband. I almost didn't answer. We'd met a handful of times, exchanged polite nods at school events, nothing more. I wasn't sure if I should call, he said, but I think you should know what's being said. We met for a beer a few days later. Brian looked tired, not angry, resigned. He told me Ethan had been telling mutual friends that I'd left him because I couldn't handle his daughters. Worse, he'd been telling Emma and Zoe that I was the reason they couldn't see Dottie anymore, that I was keeping her away. I felt sick, not because people might believe him, but because children were being used as leverage. Brian told me he'd seen this behavior before. During their marriage, Ethan would create conflict between him and the girls whenever he felt threatened or out of control. He wasn't telling me this to hurt Ethan. He was telling me because he was worried. We agreed on one thing immediately. The kids didn't deserve to be pawns. That night, I sat with Dottie and explained, carefully, that adults sometimes say untrue things when they're hurt. I reassured her that she hadn't done anything wrong. She listened quietly, then asked if Emma and Zoe were mad at her. No, I said. They're confused, just like you were. That seemed to ease something in her. Weeks passed. The house slowly returned to its old rhythm. Dottie started laughing more, inviting friends over again, leaving her bedroom door open. One night, as I tucked her in, she said, It's quieter now, in a good way. That's when I knew I had made the right choice. But the final escalation came unexpectedly. A certified letter arrived in the mail. From Ethan. Inside was a formal apology, pages long. He wrote about starting therapy, about recognizing patterns, about how he'd prioritize control over care. He didn't ask for reconciliation, just forgiveness. I wrote back a single paragraph, thanked him for taking responsibility, wished him well, and closed the door. Because sometimes escalation isn't about things getting louder. Sometimes it's about everything finally being said and realizing you don't need to answer anymore. I expected the dark moment to be loud. I thought it would look like me crying on the kitchen floor, or screaming into a pillow, or waking up in the middle of the night panicking about how close I'd come to marrying the wrong person. But the lowest point didn't announce itself like that. It came disguised as quiet. A few weeks after the letter, after the text stopped and the house settled into a new routine, there was this strange stretch of time where nothing was wrong, and that somehow felt worse. No crisis to react to. No arguments to analyze. No immediate danger to shield Dottie from. Just space. And in that space, all the questions I'd been pushing down finally rose to the surface. What if I'd misread things? What if I'd overreacted? What if I'd broken something that could have been fixed? Those thoughts crept in late at night, when the house was dark and Dottie was asleep, curled up with her cat and breathing slow and even. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, replaying conversations in my head. Ethan's calm tone, his insistence that I didn't understand shared custody, the way he'd looked genuinely hurt when I returned the ring. And then, like a counterweight, I'd remembered Dottie's voice in that hotel room. I feel like I'm always in the way. That sentence became the anchor that kept me from drifting back into self-doubt. But it didn't erase the grief. Because even when you do the right thing, you still mourn the life you thought you were building. I mourned the version of the future where Dottie had siblings under the same roof, where holidays were loud and messy and shared, where I wasn't doing this alone again. I mourned the woman I'd been when I said yes to that proposal, hopeful, tired, believing that love meant compromise even when it hurt. And I mourned the fact that I'd brought someone into my child's life who ended up making her feel smaller. That part was the hardest to sit with. One night, Dottie came into my room carrying her blanket. "Can I sleep here?" she asked. I made space without question. She curled up beside me and after a long silence said, "You're not mad at me, right?" The question punched the air out of my lungs. "No," I said immediately. "Never." She nodded, but didn't say anything else. A few minutes later, she added, "I like it better when it's just us." I stared at the ceiling, blinking back tears. Because what she was really saying was, I feel safe again. And that safety came at a cost. My relationship with Ethan was over. My relationship with his daughters was gone. And my relationship with my parents, who'd quietly hinted that maybe I'd been too harsh, too inflexible, was strained in ways I didn't yet know how to fix. There was no dramatic villain monologue. No moment where everyone clapped and told me I'd done the right thing. Just this heavy, in-between space where I had to sit with the consequences of choosing my child over the illusion of a complete family. That was the dark moment. Not fear, not chaos, but the lonely realization that protecting your child can mean walking away from a future you wanted and trusting that something healthier will eventually grow in its place. Even when you can't see it yet, the turning point didn't arrive as a revelation. It arrived as a decision, quiet, deliberate, and irreversible. It happened on a Tuesday night while I was folding laundry. No tears, no phone call, no dramatic confrontation. Just the steady rhythm of small socks and t-shirts in my hands, and the sudden, unmistakable clarity that I was done questioning myself. Because something had changed in Dottie. She was lighter. She sang while she brushed her teeth again. She sprawled across the living room floor with her markers and took up space without glancing over her shoulder to see if anyone was annoyed. One afternoon, as I was finishing work emails at the kitchen table, she looked up and said, "You don't look tired like before." That stopped me. I was tired. Single parenting doesn't magically get easier, but I wasn't tense anymore. I wasn't constantly monitoring emotional weather, trying to anticipate conflict, bracing myself for the next small dismissal I'd have to smooth over. That night, I sat down and made a promise to myself. Not out loud, not written down. Just a boundary I locked into place. I would never again stay in a relationship that required my child to shrink so I could feel loved. The next day, Ethan texted. It wasn't angry. It wasn't pleading. It was practical. "I'm going to be in your area this weekend. If you want to talk, let me know." I stared at the message for a long time, and then I didn't respond. Not because I was afraid. Not because I hated him, but because I didn't owe him another conversation to justify a decision that had already protected my child. That was the moment I understood something I'd spent years unlearning. Closure doesn't come from the other person agreeing with you. It comes from choosing not to reopen doors you fought to close. Instead of replying, I took Dottie out for ice cream. Just us. No reason, no balancing act, no one being left behind. As we sat on the curb outside the shop, legs swinging, she said something that sealed everything in place. "You always come back for me," she said, "even when you're tired." I swallowed hard and smiled, because that was the turning point. Not proving Ethan wrong. Not fixing anything. Just choosing us over and over without apology. The fallout didn't explode all at once. It unfolded slowly, the way truth usually does. Quietly, then all at once, then permanently. At first, Ethan tried to control the narrative. To friends, he framed it as timing issues and blended family complications. He told people I was intense, that I'd overreacted, that I didn't understand what shared custody required. Some people nodded along. It's easier to believe a calm, reasonable-sounding man than a woman who chose her child over a wedding. But stories don't stay neat when they're built on omissions. They fray. They contradict themselves. They collapse under their own weight. I started hearing things indirectly. Friends who'd once been enthusiastic about our engagement stopped asking how Ethan was doing. Invitations I knew he'd usually be included in started coming just to me. The casual, "we should all get together sometime" energy around him disappeared. Not because I said anything. I didn't need to. The pattern spoke for itself. Ethan's ex, Brian, kept his word about protecting the kids. He corrected misinformation when it came up, calmly and factually. He didn't dramatize. He didn't attack. He just told the truth. That was enough. Ethan's relationship with Emma and Zoe grew strained in subtle ways. Not catastrophic, not explosive, just thinner. They were old enough to notice when adults said one thing and did another. Old enough to sense when loyalty was being demanded instead of earned. Emma stopped responding to his emotional texts with long replies. Zoe grew quieter around him. Nothing I orchestrated, nothing I interfered with. Just the natural result of kids realizing that love shouldn't feel like pressure. Meanwhile, my own world stabilized. Dottie redecorated her room. Bright colors, new shelves, a corner just for drawing. The bedroom that had briefly held tension became a space she controlled again. She joined the school science club, started inviting friends over, stopped apologizing for existing. Carol came by for Sunday dinners more often, slipping back into her role like she'd never left. One night, while we were washing dishes together, she said something that stayed with me. "You didn't just protect her," she said. "You taught her something." I knew what she meant. Dottie was watching. She'd seen me walk away, not in anger, not in fear, but in clarity. She'd seen that love doesn't require endurance tests. As for Ethan, the consequences followed him without my involvement. He lost access to the version of himself that got to be the good guy without doing the work. He lost the family he claimed to want because he couldn't accept that families don't have hierarchies where some children matter more than others. And eventually, inevitably, he lost the audience that believed his version of events. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't take satisfaction in it. Because fallout isn't about revenge. It's about gravity. When you treat a child like an inconvenience, the world eventually notices. And when you confuse control with care, the people who once leaned toward you slowly step back. I walked away quietly. He stayed behind with the mess he'd created. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel responsible for cleaning it up. A year later, our life doesn't look dramatic. It looks calm. Dottie is in 5th grade now. She comes home talking about experiments she's excited about friends she wants to invite over, about plans that stretch beyond just surviving the day. She laughs more. She sprawls across the couch. She no longer watches adults the way kids do when they're trying to figure out how much space they're allowed to take up. That alone tells me everything I need to know. As for me, I'm different too. I'm slower to trust, more deliberate, but not closed. I've started dating again, very casually, and I haven't introduced anyone to Dottie. Not because I'm afraid, but because I've learned that access to my child is earned, not assumed. Carol is still our anchor, still showing up, still reminding me that family is built through consistency, not promises. The bedroom that once held tension is now half guest room, half home office. Sometimes I work late in there, and I think about how quickly a future can shift, from certainty to cautionary tale, without a single dramatic explosion. Ethan wrote once more, months after the apology letter. He didn't ask for reconciliation. He just said he understood now why I'd done what I did. I didn't respond, not out of bitterness, but because some lessons don't need an audience. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. You cannot compromise when it comes to your child's emotional safety. Love that requires your kid to shrink is not love. A family that functions by exclusion is not a family. It's a hierarchy. And walking away from a wedding is far easier than watching your child learn she comes second. I don't regret returning that ring. I don't regret choosing my daughter. And if my story helps even one parent recognize a red flag before it becomes a scar, then everything we went through meant something. Dottie deserves to grow up knowing she is a priority, not an inconvenience. And I deserve a partner who understands that we are a package deal. That's the life I chose. And for the first time in a long time, it feels solid.